Hello and welcome to Tabletop Oddity. My name is Jay, and today we're going to be talking about something that FFG has done, which is they've released guidelines for the community use of the intellectual property. Now that doesn't sound particularly very interesting, but it could have some major impacts for how the community treats the things that we enjoy, like alt cards, and they specifically mention things like Tabletop Simulator, so Legion and X-Wing could be at risk in that, and they mention shapeways, so people printing and releasing their own models. So there's a lot to this. It's only a very short document, but it could impact the way that us as a community can treat FFG's intellectual property. So yeah, we're going to talk about that. If at the end of this video you like the video, now I'm talking about liking me presenting it rather than the actual contents of this. If you don't like the contents of this, please comment below rather than dislike the video, just because that would help me more. And if at the end of the video you've not subscribed to the channel and you think, I want to subscribe, then please also consider doing that, as it really does help. So there's a few different things, and the main one that really strikes out, I think, to the community is fear would be the Tabletop Simulator thing. So this is the document. We're not going to read it all. They do say it only refers to their intellectual property. So for example, let's say you've got a Lord of the Rings game that they have, but you do a Lord of the Rings cake, then that's actually for the people who have the intellectual property to Lord of the Rings to be bothered about, not necessarily FFG, which makes sense. So it's one thing to know, because if you do a Star Wars thing, it's Disney, whereas if you do a Star Wars Legion thing, it's FFG, which makes sense, right? So we'll just skip down to the key ones. They talk about what defines a fan creation here, but we'll do it in order, because otherwise it's going to get confusing. And it says these things are okay for your own use. So you can basically give away alternate cards, you can do fan fiction, artworks, dedicated fan websites are fine. Special accessories are fine. Now this one's a little bit weird. Special accessories for your games that you've made. Now this seems to intentionally be leaving out things like tokens, which is another potential big one, especially for something like X-Wing, a really big potential concern there. Because it says your fan creation must be for your own personal use and freely shared with the community, no selling. So did you have a cake with your logo on it of your favourite game? You can't sell that. Now this one I'm not really a fan of, because it says, did you make your own t-shirt with a hilarious game reference on it? Now a game reference, to me, that is too vague for it to be legally enforceable, if you ask in my randomly non-legal opinion. I did do A-level law, but like a game reference, depends what it is. If you say white dice are not precise, let's just say that, because there's a t-shirt floating around about that might not be I mean, it's a game reference, but it's so subtle that it might not even be related to it. I object a little bit to that one, but I mean, obviously the legal wording generally is vague enough that FFG can decide what they deem is bad or what have you. Anyway, basically it says you can't sell this stuff. So you can make an alternate card, but you can't sell it. And by selling it, they are including Patreon. They're saying you can't have that stuff behind a Patreon either. So if you were basically making alt cards and you had that on a Patreon, and I know some bloggers and stuff like that have done that in the past. I don't want to call anybody out because obvious reasons. That's not allowed. Now, the fact that it says special accessories for your games essentially suggests that tokens and stuff like that should be excluded and you shouldn't sell them. And there's a few token makers that I think would be like, I hope they actually don't come after me. And the enforcement of this is one thing that is probably perhaps not going to happen. But FFG are probably covering their backs, so it just gives the power to FFG. They already had the power, but it just gives the power to FFG. Now it says that if you are going to do stuff like make alternate fan art or whatever, then you need to credit the IP owner. That's fine. It talks about how you should name your stuff. So if the game is called Ultra Awesome, don't make it sound like it's a subset of Ultra Awesome. So don't say Ultra Awesome Continuum Magic. Fine. Your fan creation must not look affiliated or sponsored by them. They don't want it to seem like your official fan fiction is a FFG product. Again, fine. And then we get onto some of the key bits here, which is do not include substantial amounts of copied game materials in your fan creation. And the ones that strike out to me, obviously, as a Legion player, would be that it specifically mentions Tabletop Simulator, right? And Vassal as well. Yeah, okay. This could be very interesting. They're saying don't include too much of the FFG's products in that digital online version of it. And I don't necessarily know if they're calling out the Legion mod. Maybe the Legion mod is fine, but it's my opinion now that if I was the maker of the Legion mod, Terrence, great guy by the way, absolutely lovely, fantastic gentleman, what I would maybe do is I'd maybe look at taking out some of the cards that are in the, because you don't need that. If you already own the game, you probably already have the cards. You don't really need them in the game. Maybe you could just have the content of the card written down rather than like an alternate version of the card. I hope we can find a middle ground here where these games are going to get left. Now it might be that FFG aren't even going to go after the Tabletop Simulator mods. They're just giving themselves the power to do so if they want to. However, I would personally preempt that if I was the maker of these mods and try and reduce my FFG content in them, because the reality is you can play Legion and other games sort of conceptually with maybe different models or what have you. So there's stuff you can do to limit that. I hope we don't see a massive shift towards this being removed, because for a lot of people it's a easy way of getting games quite easily. Yeah, they probably still own the stuff, but if I wanted a game today, I'd be very hard pressed to find one. But on Tabletop Simulator, I probably would. So yeah, that's a concern. I think what we should see is a decrease in FFG materials in those products, just as to be safe. And I think FFG will probably leave it well alone. They're just giving themselves the power to, come down hard on that if they need it. Digitalized versions of the card game expansions, basically they're just ditching that. I don't know if anybody does that. I think there was like a Skullforge app. Not really 100% sure what that was, but they've ditched that. 3D print files of miniatures and other components. So this is interesting because I don't really understand. They're saying such as shapeways. These are a substantial amount, but it depends what you're 3D printing. If it's a generic sci-fi trooper, you wouldn't really be able to stop that. I mean, GW can't stop generic-looking space marine alternative sculpts. So I'm not really sure if they've got the power to do that one specifically, but it's another big one is the no apps allowed, which I'm instantly thinking of Fly Casual there, if I'm honest. That's ditched. You pretty much can't have your own standalone software product, so that's probably out of the questions. Possibly also talking about an app for list builder may also get ditched. I would very much like FFG to step up here and make their own, but that's a separate issue. But yeah, that's another one. Somebody couldn't come along and make a Star Wars Legion tabletop game on its own. That would be, too much. And then, I mean, this one, it's got, I don't think it's directed at me. Commentary creation, which I think essentially is what I do. I'm commenting on this. For example, I comment on the releases, I make battle reports and stuff like that. So this one probably affects me. So what you might hear now might be biased, but I think this one's probably okay. Commentary creation, a podcast video or written article whose primary subject matter discusses the game, critiques that. Yeah, this is great. This is great. We love that you want to talk and write about us. Thank you. I love you too. If you receive direct or indirect monetary sponsorship by any way of active, passive, or advertisement, this will not be considered selling. So this was like, when I first started reading, I was like, damn, I'm at risk. Basically, I get ad revenue from YouTube. There's no doubt about that. I do. It's not like loads. I'm not even in control of the selling of the ads or what have you, but I do get ad revenue from them. It's $50 a month, maybe, whatever it is. That's fine. Okay, which I think you sort of need to, because I'm not actually selling off. I'm not selling like FFG products. I'm just talking about them. I'm allowed to talk about football, and the Premier League don't come after me, for example. So I think that is fine and reasonable. That's generally how people handle podcasts, YouTube, and all that kind of stuff. That's fine. So what it does say is that your revenue generated from a community commentary creation cannot also be used to support a fan creation, so in other words, you can ask for donations to support the cost of your podcast video or commentary creation, but you cannot exchange any goods containing their IP for that donation. So, for example, and I'm not naming anyone specifically, but if a podcast was giving away alternate art cards for the Patreon money, then essentially it's saying, well, you're doing a fan creation and getting paid for that, then that's not allowed, which is fine. I say it's fine. There's some people who won't be happy with that, I think, but that's what it's saying isn't currently allowed. And the one thing I have a bit of concern here is that I was going to release some t-shirts, and I probably still will. And my t-shirts probably won't be... They shouldn't impact FFG's IP in any way. Like, they should be generic enough. They might reference Star Wars Legion, maybe, but it won't be stuff like Jump 2. Do you know what I mean? It won't be the exact phrasing. It'll be like fan concepts of the game. So maybe like Super Friends, etc. So I'm not too concerned about that. I think I'll be okay. But yeah, because mine shouldn't fall foul of the rules by default. Therefore, my commentary creation shouldn't be used to support the fan creation, etc. So that is what it is. That's what we've got, and I ranted on that for quite a while already. But it could be quite significant for the community, as I said. So like, there's a few mind-blowing ones there. Like, essentially, tokens are at risk. For sure. Whoa, it's very bright in here all of a sudden. Tokens are at risk. Because you can't sell things that relate to what was their exact wording? Let me have a look at that again, just so I can be clear. It's a fan creation, basically. It's a special accessory for your game. Essentially, what it is, isn't it? So tokens are at risk, which isn't particularly great. Podcasters who are doing like alt art cards, which is something I was considering doing for Patreon, but probably gonna have to get ditched. They're at risk. Tabletop Simulator is at risk. Shapeways is at risk. Now, I think Shapeways, if you're 3D printing Star Wars miniatures, I think you're probably at risk anyway. This applies to all of FFG games, not just Legion. I'm just looking at it with a Legion tilt because that's the game I mostly do. And I think it's mostly okay. Like, I don't think there's a massive change here. I don't think FFG will go out and enforce this, like, 100%. But I just completely knocked the mic there. But I think there are some things as a community we could maybe step back a little bit on. Like in the Tabletop Simulator, we might need to remove the cards, as I said, and just have generic text instead in place of that. There's stuff that we can do to comply with this a little bit better, I think. But yeah, the community as a whole might not be particularly happy with this. If you start ditching people's like acrylic tokens, people would not be happy. Like, because cardboard tokens get damaged and easily ruined and stuff like that. So I wouldn't want to see that, but it could definitely happen. Alt cards are, as long as you're not selling them, still okay. Just don't sell them. Tabletop Simulator, as I said, just at risk. Fly casual, probably, if we're honest, like that's essentially completely clearly outlined that it's not a good thing it's not something they want. So yeah, it's interesting. I'm not unhappy with it, if that makes sense. It depends on how hard they enforce some of the things. Like Tabletop Simulator, how much is okay and how much is not is going to be a question. But I think as long as it looks like you're actively trying to comply to what FFG want, I think stuff like that will be fine. The interesting part is the fan creations. I do think that the game reference may be overstepping the bounds, because that's not intellectual property unless they like trademark it and stuff like that. At least I believe that would be the case. I'm trying to think of examples from other games, but I can only think of like Legion. But in X-Wing, you might have like, is a Talon roll, if there's a phrase Talon roll, trademarked copyright? Don't know. I personally think that's a bit weak, but I doubt they would enforce it if you just put like, do a Talon roll, because Talon roll I think is a term outside of X-Wing. It's hard for me to find examples, but you know what I mean. I'm sure there are Star Wars X-Wing examples that could be used there, but I just can't think of them. Overall, I think it probably was needed. They probably need to do this, and then what really matters isn't this, it's what happens next and how quickly it happens and what they actually do. I'm sort of hoping that it'll be, unless it's a really very bad example of somebody abusing FFG's IP, that they'll probably leave it. If it's just a case of like mild, like the tokens and Tabletop Simulator takes the stuff out, and if it's that case, then I don't think FFG will bother, and I sort of hope that's going to be the case. So I've opened the blinds and it's too bright in here, so I'm going to go. I think overall this isn't anything particularly to be worried about for most people, so don't get too stressed. And I think it's probably something they needed to legally do, and I hope they probably won't enforce most of it, because they don't really have to. And generally when you start clamping down on this kind of stuff, you get a lot of ill will, regardless of whether or not it's right or wrong. So and I think things here will be okay, but you know, we'll have to wait and see, won't we? I think that is the key thing. Hopefully we won't be back on in a couple of days going to be like, somebody's got a cease and desist. Hopefully it'll be like, we just never talk about it again. So like this video, don't dislike it because you dislike the subject. That really hurts me, so don't do that. Subscribe if you're not already subscribed. You should definitely though. Have a beautiful day and goodbye.